get going?
Just give me a cue when you want me to start, Sarah.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. So nice to see you all virtually. We'll get started in just a moment. We encourage you all to keep your video on if you're able. So even though we're in a virtual space, we can see each other. Keep your microphone off if possible, so that we can hear each other as we're going along. And when Sarah gives me the okay, we will get started.
Dorothy, let's just give it one more minute and then you can get started whenever you're ready, but give it one more minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So nice to see new friends, old friends. Excited to see you all today. We had 130 people plus register. I know some folks will drop in and out, but we're super excited to see you all today. So good morning and welcome to Wealth Day. CEP and our Wealth Day partners have been hosting this event since 2016. We have an exciting day of advocacy and education planned for you. But first, let's give a huge virtual round of applause for the CEP staff, Sarah, Aaron, and Beth, and all of our wealth partners who have worked so hard to put this event together. The wealth partners include Clean Air Now, Climate Action KC, Destination Innovation, Friends of the Caw, Kansas Interfaith Action, Kansas Natural Resource Council, Kansas Permaculture Institute, KC Farm School, the Kansas Rural Center, Kansas Sierra Club, Metropolitan Energy Center, and our team here at the Climate and Energy Project. Your advocacy has never been more important than it is today. On Monday, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released their 6th assessment, which was approved by 195 governments. This report makes clear that risk to humans and to nature accelerate with every additional fraction of a degree of warming. Camille Parmesan, an ecologist at the University of Texas, Austin, and one of the researchers who prepared the report said, one of the most striking conclusions in our report is that we're seeing adverse impacts that are much more widespread and much more negative than expected. To meet the climate crisis we're facing, the IEA's Net Zero by 2050 report calls for scaling up solar and wind rapidly this decade, reaching annual additions of 630 gigawatts of solar PV and 390 gigawatts of wind by 2030. That's 4 times the record levels that were set in 2020. For solar PV, this is the equivalent to installing the world's current largest solar park roughly every day for the next 10 years. For 2 decades, Kansas has been a strong leader in wind energy, creating positive impacts for our environment, our economy, and in our climate fight. Unfortunately, in recent years, disinformation campaigns about health and safety, reduced property values, and negative wildlife impacts have spread, leading to unfounded concerns about the wind industry. As wind and solar grow and begin to take more and more of the market share from fossil fuel industry, we are beginning to see the disinformation campaigns grow. To meet the climate crisis, we must use all the tools we have to reduce carbon pollution. Today, you'll hear about how our partners are working to build a healthy and resilient Kansas with a focus on water, energy, air, land, transportation, and health, Kansas Wealth. I'm very excited to be with you and thrilled that our work together will let policymakers know that we want them to take action on climate change. And now I'd like to turn it over to Sarah DeHart-Faltico, who will be our guide for the next 90 minutes. Sarah is a program coordinator at the Climate and Energy Project, focused on building community power. She manages CEP's voter engagement work and the Kansas Environmental Leadership Program. She's also forging a multi-organizational coalition to build political power on climate action in Kansas. Sarah?
Thanks, Dorothy. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am excited to be with you today for our virtual Wealth Day of Advocacy. First, I would like to also take a moment to all of you to thank you for taking the time to come together today to advocate for a stronger and more resilient Kansas. I'd also like to thank the Wealth Partners for their steadfast work in doing the same and for their efforts in helping plan and host this event today for all of you. We are all in this together, and it's an honor to work alongside these folks. I do encourage you to take the time today to explore their exceptional work in and across Kansas as well. So as we get geared up for the day, I want to start with kind of a general overview and let you know what you can expect. So for a schedule of the day's events, you can visit the digital toolkit that contains everything you'll need for the day. We'll drop that in the link, but you should have received an email from me out from yesterday and maybe again this morning with the toolkit for the day. So in a nutshell, in terms of how the day is going to work, we've scheduled information sessions in panels throughout the day. But then when you're not listening to a panel or a briefing, the idea is that you're using the toolkit to learn about issues and take specific actions. During this morning's session, we'll get familiar with the wealth advocacy issues that are at the state legislature this session. We'll familiarize ourselves with the digital advocacy toolkit. And then I'm excited that at some point in time, hopefully right around 9:30, U.S. Representative Sharice Davids will join us for some brief remarks. They are voting today in the House, and so her schedule is a little bit variable. It's a bit of a variable for us today, so we'll just kind of work around that. We will then break around 10:30 until 11 o'clock to give you all some time to engage in some of the actions in the toolkit. At 11, there'll be a briefing on the Kansas Energy Efficiency Investment Act, or KEIA, filing by Evergy to the Kansas Corporation Commission. That will be presented by Beth Pauley here at CEP and Ty Gorman of the Kansas Sierra Club. And then at noon, after another half-hour break or so, Zach Pastora will moderate a lunchtime legislative panel at noon. And then Lydia Nebel with KC Farm School will moderate the Youth Power Coalition panel at 1. So then we'll break for a couple of hours so that you can all continue your advocacy efforts using the toolkit, and we'll reconvene at 4 o'clock to close out the day. Again, your agenda can be found at the link that Beth has dropped into the chat and also in the email that was sent out. The Zoom link is the same for all the sessions today, and we will keep the Zoom room open throughout the day. So feel free to hop on during breaks if you have any questions, or to just stay on the Zoom link all day and then go off camera and on mute. We will keep people muted during sessions to minimize background noise. So please use the raise hand function and the chat box to ask your questions. So for those of you that aren't super familiar with Zoom, in order to raise your hand, I'm just going to give you a little tutorial. If you look down at the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll see a number of icons, and you look for the reactions icon, which is a little smiley face with a plus sign. If you click on that, you'll see a button where you can raise your hand. And once you've raised your hand and we address you, you'll then need to use that same button to lower your hand. To type questions in the chat, you can look for the chat icon also along the bottom, and you can click on that to ask a question to everyone, or you can actually send direct messages to a specific person that's also participating today. And use this time to connect with each other as well. If you see someone that you know, feel free to engage with them using direct messages in the chat. tag them in your social media post or stay on after a session, and we could even put you in a breakout room if y'all want to catch up. For social media posts throughout the day, please use the hashtag wealth #Wealth Day 2022, and we're going to drop a list of other hashtags that you can use as well. All of these hashtags can also be found in your toolkit. So that covers some of the general housekeeping. Please drop any questions that you have in the chat. I will note there was a question that Leslie asked about whether or not we would be recording all of these sessions, and the answer is yes, we are. And it does look like Representative Davids will be on time today, so we can expect her to be joining right around 9:30. So after Representative Davids speak, like I said, we're going to pivot to the wealth-specific topics. But before then, at this time, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Moti Reber, who will give us some general insight into this year's legislative session and how it's been going. Rabbi Moti has served as Executive Director of Kansas Interfaith Action and its predecessor organization, Kansas Interfaith Power and Light, since March of 2011. He is a graduate of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in Wyncote, Pennsylvania, and a lifelong activist on peace, social justice, and environmental issues. Rabbi Moti brings a variety of pulpit, interfaith, and organizational experience to the work of Kansas Interfaith Action. And he and his wife, Susie, have 3 adult children, and they live in Overland Park. Thank you, Moti, so much. Welcome.
All right, thank you. Give me screen sharing for a second. I have a cute thing I want to share just for a second. Is that possible?
I'm working on it. I think Aaron's working on it too.
All right. It'll only be, it's. All right.
Try it now. Yep.
This is my legislative report. All right, was that worth it? So I have three points I want to make. One is that wind is great. Those of us who have been in the business for a while remember a time when the wind industry was not established, was trying to be strangled in its cradle. That there were votes that were happening at 11 o'clock at night that meant the difference between having a vibrant wind industry in Kansas and not. This year, some of the conversations by a couple of the legislators are similar to those conversations, but the attitude is completely different. Wind at this stage is an established industry in Kansas. It's seen as being, a vital part of Kansas's economy. It's a completely different situation. Dorothy alluded to, and we'll talk about this more, a number of bills in the Senate Utilities Committee that would have basically made it impossible for further wind development to happen in Kansas, and those bills did not even get out of committee. In one case, there was a bill that didn't even get a second. So that's hugely different. So as much as I shiver when I think about the Kansas legislature, for that particular issue, the difference is night and day between 10 years ago and now. So that's a very positive thing. I think what happens is that once something becomes business, it has a different kind of tenor to the people in the legislature. So, but that cuts both ways for us. So if a potential ban on single-use plastic seems like it would interfere with business, then it doesn't go anywhere. But if a bill to put limitations on utility levels wind seems like it would hurt business, then it doesn't go anywhere. So it kind of, if you can make something seem like it's business, then you have a chance of succeeding. However, it cuts both ways, as I mentioned. But then the other thing is and this is almost the opposite of that point, is that you almost still can't say the word climate. We were told by our coalition partners, our business partners, that if we said the word climate about the wind industry, that we would mess it all up. The conversation about like that saying the word climate is triggering to some people, to some conservatives. That they'll have a conversation about wind as a business. They'll see the reality of wind or renewables in general, solar too, as being a real important part of the Kansas economy. But if you stain it with climate, if you interfere by saying climate, then all of a sudden you could lose the argument, which is really challenging. And I actually had a conversation with a House leader about this. And I said, we're still not addressing the underlying issue, and we're not dealing with resilience. And he said, we're having a conversation. Wind is great. People think it's great. And if you say climate, it's not going to be great. So don't say climate. And it's hard to not argue with that, considering that people have been making that argument for a long time. But I think that we tend to over. I have always thought, as Dorothy will attest, that that we use that too much, and that there's certain points where, I think that another example is going back to the single-use plastic. We can decide that it's cleverer for us to not say the word climate, but then we're taking away an important argument on our behalf, and we're not going to win the argument anyway. So we might as well say what we mean. I really do believe that, especially on a day like Wealth Day, it's very important for people to represent themselves as being climate concerned, because it's a lot of legislators, a lot of people in the world are in silos. We know what the IPCC report says, but I doubt that there's very many state legislatures who know what the IPCC report says. And it's worth saying to them that, if you interact with them at all, that you are concerned as a Kansas citizen, you're concerned from a creation care point of view, but that who else is going to say it to them if you're not going to say it to them? I think that's especially on Wealth Day, that's really important. But it is a continuous dance for us to make the inroads that we want to make, while still addressing the underlying issue that is so difficult to even talk about. I think that's all I really have to say. There's a lot going on all over the map in the legislature. In terms of whether they talk about social issues and how far to push things, and there's an election coming up, and some people don't want to do controversial issues, and some people do want to do controversial issues, and a lot of it is internal dynamics in the Republican caucus. I don't know that really affects what we're working on, what this coalition is working on. Obviously things like Medicaid expansion, which is the part of the health, is not going forward, and that's a problem. But the difficulty of the legislature, and there, it is a difficult situation, because there's, the hard right is in charge. So we can't negate that. But I think that we can be positive about what's happening with, particularly in the renewable energy sector, and continue to talk about that as an area of growth. I think efficiency falls into that category. So if you want to stress positives, that's a real positive to stress. So I think that's all I have to say. I'm happy to Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take Madam Chairman, I'm happy to take questions at the appropriate time, but otherwise I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Modi. As a reminder, we will dive into specific topics after Representative David's remarks, but does anyone have any questions for Rabbi Modi at this time? If you do, please feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can raise your hand. I'll give a few more moments of that awkward Zoom silence. Elevate what Dorothy's saying. Thank you to Modi for all of your work at the State House. Zach's question in the chat is, do you think it's more or less bipartisan this year?
I think it's less bipartisan. I think that the Democrats have been pretty significantly sidelined. I don't think bipartisanship is really even much of an issue. The only bipartisanship there is this negotiations with the governor. That's what bipartisanship means. I think from the Democratic representatives are not really included in the conversations. I don't think they're really even communicated with largely by the committee chairs in most cases. I think that's a very difficult situation. I think there's less confrontationalism with the governor than there has been in the past. I think you saw the Apex bill, which was the big incentive bill, passed bipartisan. There seems to be less of an interest in just passing things just to get the governor to veto them, but we'll see how that plays out for the rest of the session. Education bills, right now, nothing's happening. There's the Parent Bill of Rights bill got sent back to committee. We do expect something to happen sometime before the end of the session, but there was a lot of blowback in the Republican caucus about that particular bill. So I don't know what's going to happen. We think it'll get called to the floor eventually, but they're not going to get 84 on that particular bill, and they may not get 65. 84 is veto proof, and 65 is a majority, so they're not going to put a bill on the floor that they're not going to pass. I will tell you that Josh Swati came to see me at Westminster Presbyterian Church about a week before that water bill thing went down, and he said the water bill is going to go down. So I think it was pretty well known. It goes back to that point I was making about business being a two-edged sword. I mean, there's these major business interests that basically get what they want, and what they want is, I would even say not always positive. It's quite often not positive. And in this particular case, you could even see frustration on the part of the chairman of the committee, who I think there's a lot of people who are really concerned. People who care about Western Kansas are concerned about this issue. People who are there to suck the well dry and make a buck and move on are not concerned. And unfortunately, they seem to have the gavel, I guess you would say, or they seem to have the advantage. Very difficult situation. I do think that that's a potential area of, we're not electoral groups, but that's an area of electoral advantage, and so is the education stuff. Those are conversations you could have in your districts in a completely see-through way about what people are for and what they're against. And water is one of them, because the people who vote are actually the people who care about those communities, as opposed to people who are basically there to suck it dry.
Modi, Lydia was asking if there was any talk about farmers and farms.
I don't think I'm the one to ask that question. I think that there's other people who are probably better suited to ask that question than I am, to answer that question than I am.
Do you think that would be a Zach Pastora question?
That might be a Zach Pastora question. He is rural center, isn't he?
Mm-hmm. And so we can take that. We can take that after, when we get kind of into the land. And Zach, maybe you can cover that when we start talking about the land and the wealth specific strategies.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of, the water question is also a question that other people are better suited. I'm just giving you my perspective. Water is not really an issue that I've worked on, but I just happen to be sort of scuttlebuddy in the legislature about that. And I do think that's the dynamic, but Dawn obviously will be able to talk about that in more depth at that point.
Are there any other kind of high level questions for Modi before we pivot and go through the toolkit a little bit?
I'm a high level guy. You'd have to have high level questions.
You are a high level guy, Modi.
I'm the bird's eye view guy. All right, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you at 4:00. I'm the closer too. So
thanks, Modi. I appreciate it.
The closer, so I'll see you later. Have a great day.
Thank you. So, with the time that we do have left before Representative Davids joins us, I'd like to familiarize you all with the toolkit. As I mentioned, this toolkit is going to be your resource for what to engage on and how. And when you're not in session, we do invite you to use it to learn more about specific issues, share messaging on social media, and email and call and engage your legislators. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can all see what I'm referring to. But I will say that Beth just dropped a link in the chat. So if you have any problems, let us know. And I'm going to go ahead and pull mine up. Give me just a second there. All right. Dorothy or Beth, would you give me a thumbs up if you can see it? Okay, great. So this is the toolkit, and you all should have access to it. If you're having any trouble, drop us a note in the chat and let us know. So on this main page, it just is kind of a welcome. And then if you scroll down here, you'll see that there is a table of contents. These are all active links. So you can click on the Wealth Day schedule and get to the schedule that's down below. You can also, I wanted to point out that the talking points are organized both by wealth topic and by partner organization. So let's say you've heard of Casey Farm School, but you want to learn a little bit more about what they do. So you click on this and it brings you to the partner organizations, and it goes through and they're all listed here. So then if you come down to Casey Farm School at Gibbs Road, hang on, I got to move my chat bar on a thing that you guys can't see. And
Sarah, can you make that a little bit larger for anybody with old eyes? And just a reminder, at some point, we want to have people begin to introduce themselves in the chat, maybe with their organization that they're with, or what brings them here today.
Yeah, and you can do that while we're going through this as well. If you want to say who you are, where you're hailing from, and what brings you here today. Thank you, Dorothy. Is that a little bit easier to see? Okay. So if you click on the Casey Farm School, it'll take you direct to them. And you can see that the work that they do most aligns with water, land, and health. And then from here, you can see what the advocacy issues are that they support. So you can see that they're supporting agricultural land preservation and land access. And you can see specifically what actions they're going to recommend that you take. So they're going to recommend that you reach out to their farm director, Lydia Nebel. They're going to recommend that you join or follow the National Young Farmers Coalition to learn more about the issues. And then there might be some talking points that they share that will be shared that you can use in your engagement when you're talking about these issues, when you're engaging with legislators, et cetera, et cetera. There'll also be some related resources and some social media hashtags that you can use. And then it goes on by each organization. So they also support the elimination of the state sales tax on food. And the suggested actions there are to call, write, and visit your legislators and tell them that a tax on food is regressive. There's some talking points that are specific to Casey Farm School since they're located in Wyandotte County. And then the third issue that they're supporting is full funding for the state water plan. And their suggestion is to defer to Friends of the Caw and what they recommend, for example. So that is how you can utilize this toolkit when it's organized by the organization. You can also utilize this toolkit and look specifically at wealth topics. And this is not wanting to open for me. Let's see if we got it. So let's say you're interested in what is happening with energy. You can click straight to energy and you can see what the issues are that are specific to energy that we're talking about today and the actions that you can take on that as well. So you could send a video message to a policymaker saying that you support clean energy. I will note, since I'm here, make sure that you click the appropriate link given whether or not you live in or out of Johnson County. There is also going to be some resources there, for example, that you can use and related hashtags. If you want to take some action around the KIA filing, then you can take this suggested action. So all of that being said, you can engage with this toolkit by organization. You can engage with this toolkit by topic. And then back up here, there are some other links that are going to be helpful for you to have. One is an advocacy one-on-one training video or 101 training video that Zach Pastora and Justice Horn put together for us. So feel free to kick back and enjoy that. And then there's also some links so that you can look up your legislators, a link directly to the Kansas Legislature website, and also one that will take you to the committee assignments so that you can see which legislators are sitting on which committees. And that is pertinent for some of the work in the toolkit today. There's also a social media toolkit that has some sample posts and some content that you can use and share out on social media. And then beneath that, there are some hashtags that you can use, along with the hashtags that are specific to each of the suggestion actions in the toolkit itself. So I wanted to just take a few minutes and go over that with you. Does anyone have any specific questions around the toolkit? And then Dorothy, I want to let you, actually, we're going to hold those questions because it does look like Representative Davids has joined us. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to Dorothy to introduce U.S. Representative Sharice Davids. Dorothy?
Thank you, Sarah. We're so excited, Representative Davids, to have you here today. If you are in a place that you can share your video, we'd love to see you. Hello, good to see you, Representative Davids.
You too. So just so you know, votes are going on, and I'm kind of running all over to, thank you, to get set up here. But luckily, I am in a place where I can be on video. So thank you.
Well, we're super excited to see you today. I'll take just a brief moment to introduce you in case there's anyone who doesn't know you. But Representative Sharice Davids proudly represents the Kansas 3rd District. She was raised by a single mother who served in the Army for 20 years. After graduating from Leavenworth High School, Representative Davids worked her way through Johnson County Community College and the University of Missouri, Kansas City, before earning a law degree from Cornell Law School. It is that foundation that allowed her to go on to a successful career focused on economic and community development, which included time as a White House fellow in the Department of Transportation under President Barack Obama. Representative Davids has focused her career on ensuring everyone has the opportunity to thrive, which is one of the things that I value about you so much. In Congress, Representative Davids is putting Kansans first, working to limit the influence of special interest and fighting to make healthcare more affordable and accessible to everyone. She's a leader on transportation and infrastructure policy, where she focuses on making smart, sustainable investments that set the foundation for economic growth in the years to come. She was sworn into the 116th Congress. When she was sworn in, Representative Davids became one of the first 2 Native American women to serve in Congress. She's the vice chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and sits on the Small Business Committee, where she chairs the subcommittee on economic growth, tax, and capital access. She is a resident of Roland Park. And again, welcome, Representative Davids. We're so glad to have you here today, meeting with our wealth partners.
Well, thank you so much, Dorothy, for the introduction. And I'm using my headphones. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, you can or you can't?
Yes, can.
Yes. Okay, cool. Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for having me. And hopefully I will have plenty of time to get through the remarks that I've prepared. I'm really, really excited to join you all for the Climate and Energy Project's annual Wealth Day event. And I did get to hear a little bit of the explanation of the toolkit. Very cool stuff. Thank you all for putting that kind of stuff together. I'm definitely inspired by the dedication that you all have to advocacy and building a better future for Kansas. Through improvements to our water and energy, air, land, transportation, and health systems. I'm a big infrastructure nerd, and all of these things touch right on the core of the stuff that I love the most. So I know that you all are going to learn a lot throughout the day as you hear from Kansas legislators, activists, advocates, future leaders, current leaders, and so I'm not going to give a ton of remarks, but I think that it is important for us to keep in mind the and we're feeling it, the time and place that we're in. We're coming off of years of dealing with the pandemic. Our health systems have been challenged, and that's not just public health and well-being, but our education system, our economy, our housing systems, our justice systems, and so many other things. And I think that we saw the gaps that were exposed or exacerbated, issues were exacerbated by COVID, and then that led to an economic crisis. And I feel like I wish we could all see each other in person, in part because I think we're tired. People are tired, and that's both probably physically, but also just kind of overall in terms of our well-being. And I think that the work that you all are doing is part of the way that we're going to get back to being healthier and addressing issues of our well-being. And I know we've, at least from the federal perspective, we've been working on that. We did things like pass the American Rescue Plan. We have been working on pulling our economy back from really from the brink, of getting our vaccines rolled out, trying to get more shots in arms, and doing everything we can to keep our essential systems, whether that's public transit to schools, universities, businesses, up and going to the extent we can. And then, we are also starting that, going from the emergency to trying to make sure we're dealing with our public health issues to now looking forward to how we're going to have a thriving economy. And the bipartisan infrastructure bill or law is a historic package that is going to help us get there by addressing some of the decades of underinvestment that we've seen. So whether we're talking about creating good paying jobs, that's another vote. I don't know how loud that is to you all. It's loud in here with the buzzing. From, where was I? Underinvestment in infrastructure and addressing that, trying to get to a thriving economy. I mean, I think that, when we talk about figuring out ways to make sure that our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren have everything they need, the opportunities that they need to really thrive. Some of the work that we've been doing is going to help get us there, but we also know we have a lot of work to do, and making sure that our supply chains, that shipping routes, that our public education system, that these things are stay at the front of mind, and that while we're doing all of that, our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren have clean water to drink and clean air to breathe, is going to be just like so significant. And so I think that what you all are doing and the advocacy and skills that you're building up is a huge part of that. In fact, just recently I joined a group of my Democratic colleagues to call on President Biden to act quickly to negotiate a deal with the Senate to pass the climate and energy provisions from the Build Back Better legislation. And we're going to continue to push hard for the transformational climate action that we know we need to create an economy and planet that's going to work for our kids and grandkids. And I just would ask for you all to continue to stay in touch with our office, to continue to reach out to both my office and our state legislators and anybody else who you can think of to help us make sure we're creating the best policy and legislation that we can. I love that I said I'm not going to talk for very long, and then true to form for a member of Congress, it was like 9 minutes after that. So thank you all so much. I really do appreciate your also the flexibility and that sort of thing with the timing and everything.
Well, we're super, super excited to see you. We appreciate everything you do. We know it's not easy to care about these issues in today's sometimes unfriendly world to climate change, but we do appreciate you. We thank you so much for being here. And we will act however you would like us for acting on climate. So, you know, whatever we can do to help move those provisions along, you know, we certainly are at your service because we do want to see climate action.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know that the expectation across the country, or not, expectation is not the right word, the assumption that people make, you all are completely rebutting and pushing back on assumptions that people make about folks in the Midwest and in the Kansas City region and Kansas. So thank you for the work you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We'll
for
talk to you all
joining us.
soon.
Happy voting.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, that is a huge thank you to Representative Davids for her time and for her climate action for Kansas and beyond. It's time now to focus in on the specific wealth topics. We will go through each of the topics themselves and then save some questions until the end. That way we can make sure that we get through all of them and in the time that we have allotted. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go, and then we'll get to as many as we can once we've covered all the topics. So we'll start first with water, and Dawn Buehler of Friends of the Cause is going to kick us off. I'm not going to read each person's full biography in order to leave as much time as possible to go over the issues themselves and to get to questions later. So you can find more about each speaker on our website, and that link will be dropped in the chat here in just a moment. So Dawn Buehler is the Kansas Riverkeeper and Executive Director of Friends of the Kaw. In her role as the Kansas Riverkeeper, Dawn is a non-governmental public advocate that works to protect and preserve the Kansas River. She's also the chair of the Kansas Water Authority and the governor's appointee for the Oil and Gas Advisory Committee. Dawn is very active. She's active on the board of directors for the Kansas Land Trust and the board of directors for Kansas Alliance for Wetlands and Streams. Dawn, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Does the sound good? You get a thumbs up? Thank you.
Yep, sounds good.
Great. It's a pleasure to be with you all today for Wealth Day. I'm really happy that we were able to have this event, even if it's on Zoom. I do look forward to being with all of you in person again at the State House. I'm happy to kick off the W in Wealth Day today. And first, I would like to drop in the chat box a document that might help you. And this is the Kansas Water Authority's 2022 annual report to the governor and the legislature. And this document has lots of information about water in Kansas and the state water plan. So it might help you to learn more. So before we get started, I want to say a little bit about that annual report to the governor. You'll notice on the inside cover that as the chair of the Kansas Water Authority, I wrote a letter to the governor and the legislature. And this is the first time ever that we've mentioned climate change in the annual report to the governor and the legislature. And I put it both in my letter, and then it's also, there's a whole section now in the new state water plan on climate issues. And so we've also got some regional advisory committees that are working on nature-based solutions also around climate. So I feel like we've really come a long way with putting some of these things in writing at the state level. And so I'm really excited about that. So first thing I want to bring to your attention is the last 2 years, there has been a House Water Committee, and the recent attention on water has been wonderful, and we're really grateful for this committee for bringing attention to water. The House Water Committee, they spent the last 2 years reviewing every single agency that has anything to do with water. They asked each agency to come in and talk about their budget and about what they do. And then this committee went back and they put forth a bill. And this was the bill that everyone's been talking about, the House Bill 2686. And now this was not a perfect bill, and everyone agreed on that. There were a lot of things in it that a lot of people didn't agree about, but one of the things that was significant about the bill was the introduction to make a new water agency, to bring water to a cabinet level agency. And I want you to think about this in this perspective. So you have all these different agencies like Wildlife and Parks and Kansas Department of Health and Environment. They have a secretary who then reports to the governor. And so that's what's called a cabinet level agency. And the Kansas Water Office is not a cabinet level agency. And so oftentimes what happens is that water gets left out of conversations. For example, the federal infrastructure bill, a lot of the conversations initially about that left water out of the conversation. And if we had had a cabinet level secretary, we would have had more inclusion into those conversations. So that was part of the reason why the House Water Committee was pushing for a cabinet level agency. That bill did not pass out as an original bill. There was a substitute bill that did pass, but that substitute bill did not include any of the agency restructuring. So I want to talk for a minute about the federal infrastructure money, just to give you an update. There is a new committee being put together by the governor to look at the federal infrastructure dollars, and water does have a seat at the table. We're excited about that. So along with transportation and some other agencies that are included in the infrastructure bills. So we know that that committee will work on how to fund those water and infrastructure projects across the state. I would like to talk for a minute about something that's really important to Friends of the CAW, and that has been that we have advocated for a long time to fund the statutory $8 million to the state water plan. So what is the state water plan? It's a comprehensive document that plans for water quantity and quality across the entire state of Kansas, and it includes some language this year on climate. So I encourage you to go to the Kansas Water Office website and take a look at that document. But what the statute says for water, for the state water plan, is that statutorily the state is supposed to put in $6 million from the general fund and $2 million from the EDIF fund, Economic Development Fund. And that has not happened in 15 years. And so for the first time in 15 years, Governor Kelly has put full statutory funding into her budget. And we have advocated for this at the State House. What we've heard is that there is support to fully fund that statutory $8 million. But I want to make this clear. The $8 million is the state's portion, and then there's a portion that is fees. And so the total that goes into the state water plan is $23 million. But the Blue Ribbon Task Force several years ago came up with what it would cost to fully implement that state water plan. And the price tag is $55 million a year. And we're at $23 million. So we have a long way to go. So when we talk about really full funding of the water plan, the full funding is $55 million. The statutory full funding is the $8 million. And then also this year, one of the things that we've been advocating for is that there is some one-time big lump sum money coming into the state. And we've been advocating to pay down the reservoir debt, long-term reservoir debt at 3 major reservoirs, Milford, Perry, and Hillsdale. And those are reservoirs where we do not have income to offset the costs for those. Those 3 reservoirs have balloon payments that are going to come due. And when those come due, they're going to be big. So if you pull up that state water plan, or I'm sorry, that annual report that I linked in the box, on page 13, we talk about reservoir water supply. And so as an example, Milford Reservoir has a balloon payment of $37.9 million due in 2034. 2034 is not that far away, folks. I think that's about the time I'm supposed to retire. And it feels closer all the time. And we have got to figure out how we're going to deal with that. And so if we don't pay it in 2034, when it comes due, we either have to bond it out, which will cost us more money, or we have to default on that payment. And what happens is that storage then isn't controlled by the state of Kansas, it's controlled by the Corps of Engineers. And we need those downstream water supply. We need water supply secured downstream. So as far as advocacy, things that you can talk to your legislator about is about making sure that they know that you support the statutory funding of the $8 million to the state water plan, and making sure that we support any infrastructure dollars towards water and or the one-time lump sum money that the state has to pay down some of our reservoir debt. And with that, that's my update on water. I'm sure many of you have lots of questions. I will just say this, you're more than welcome to contact me offline, and I'm happy to visit with any of you about any of the water issues. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Dawn. And if you do have questions, drop them in the chat. We can try to get to them at the very end. And hopefully we will be spending about 5 to 7 minutes per topic, which should give us ample time to get to some questions at the end. Again, thank you, Dawn. I appreciate it and all of your work. Next, we will turn to Dorothy Barnett to talk about energy. As the Executive Director of the Climate and Energy Project, Dorothy Barnett has been successful in convening diverse voices in our conservative region of the country. She has coordinated winning campaigns to protect the Kansas Renewable Portfolio Standard from special interest group attacks during 4 legislative sessions, and her work has supported the wind industry to grow to 40% of the state's power generation in just a decade. Under Dorothy's leadership, CEP continues to innovate and reach new audiences with projects like Wealth, Kansas Climate Corps, the Kansas Environmental Leadership Project, and the Clean Energy Business Council, which is a multi-sector business group focused on advancing the energy economy. Thank you, Dorothy. You want to take it away?
Hi, Sarah. Thank you, everybody. It's good to be with you. Good to see you. Sorry, my Siri is giving me some points there. A lot has been happening at the legislature with energy. I'm not going to go through each bill, but as Modi mentioned, really having some 8 anti-renewable bills of some form or another. There are a couple bills that are still outstanding, specifically around wind energy. One is Senate Bill 478 that would require a certain kind of lighting to be attached to wind turbines. And when you hear that, you think, well, it's not that big of a deal. But if you don't realize that all of the lighting that is attached to a wind turbine has to be approved by the FAA, and not only for each wind farm, but down to the individual wind turbine. And so you might have, if you have a state law that says you can only have this certain kind of lighting, and then you try to build a wind farm and get permission from the FAA to put that specific kind of lighting on a wind turbine, they might only say 3 turbines in that array qualify for that type of lighting. So essentially, it could be a poison pill for the renewable energy industry as it relates to wind. We think it's possible that Senator Thompson may try to have that hearing next week, is what we're hearing about. That bill was blessed, and so we suspect it will go back to Senate Utilities. The other kind of renewable energy, attack bill that we see is Senate Bill 374, which would take away the 10-year property tax exemption that wind and solar and other types of energy generation all have a 10-year property tax exemption. Used to be a lifetime property tax exemption for wind and solar. In 2015, that was changed to a 10-year property tax exemption. It's possible that there will be an attempt to get rid of that property tax exemption just for renewable energy. It would leave the property tax exemption in for oil and gas. No hearing's been set on that, but again, that's a blessed bill, so it could move forward at any time. The other two bills that we're watching as it relates to energy are House Bill 2689 and House Bill 2696. These bills are a couple of kind of complicated bills that have to do with securitization. You all may remember that last year a bill was signed into law that would allow utilities to retire some of their coal plants early, refinance that debt to be able to allow for a lower cost to customers. That bill has been used by the gas industries when we had the high gas prices from Winter Storm Uri. Unfortunately, Evergy introduced these two bills that would allow them to keep their coal plants in rate base, or keep us paying for their coal plants just in case they are needed for just in case they're needed for backup generation during another climate crisis event. I don't know about you all, but there's something about that that feels wrong. Let's keep the fossil fuel generating plants that are causing the climate change available in case we have another climate change issue. Zach, I see your hands up. Did you want to address that in some way? Or can you wait until after? Okay.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay, great. Could we go on to the next slide? So the other things that I think are really important are actually happening, outside of the legislative purview, and some things that we really hope that you all will think about in your advocacy today. We're showcasing a new advocacy tool where you can send a video message to policymakers supporting clean energy, and really just letting legislators know that you support expanding clean energy for our economy and for our environment, and to make sure that they know we don't want misinformation to impact our state's ability to be a clean energy leader. And so those are a couple of things we really would like you all to focus on. The other piece, which we're going to dig deeper into with the KIA panel, is supporting energy efficiency at the KCC, at the Kansas Corporation Commission. There is going to be an opportunity for public comments. We are going to have some briefings on KIA and ways for you all to get involved. But essentially, this is the first opportunity for Kansas to really expand energy efficiency in homes and businesses in the last 8 or 9 years. And so there are some good things in that energy efficiency docket that Beth and Ty will dig into, but it also is an area that definitely needs some work. The last thing I will mention is the plastic bag ban, Senate Bill 493. This is an advocacy ask to contact your legislators and ask them to vote no on Senate Bill 493. That plastic bag ban bill did pass the House. Passed the Senate, got that backwards. And so your legislators will likely, your House members will likely be voting on that at some point. And so it's important to let them know that for the environment, because of pollution, because of the energy it takes to create the plastic bags, we need to make sure that cities and counties have the right to decide how they want to manage plastic pollution and single-use plastic. The one other issue is around utility scale solar legislation. For those of you who live in Douglas County, Douglas County has sent their regulations to the Board of County Commission. The regulations are stringent, but I think they strike the right balance between protecting the soil, protecting landowners in Douglas County, but they still allow for some flexibility that Douglas County can at some point host a utility scale solar array. Unfortunately, for those of you who live in Johnson County, Johnson County is undergoing a process for their regulations, and it has gotten very politicized. A couple of anti-clean energy senators have inserted themselves into the process of regulations at Johnson County. And right now, the regulations that are before the Board of County Commissioners are so stringent that Johnson County will not be able to host utility scale solar. So we really want to encourage Johnson County Board of County Commissioners to promote sensible regulations, regulations that aren't punitive and that would allow solar to grow. So with that, I'll stop. Sarah, happy to answer questions at the appropriate time.
Great. Thank you, Dorothy. It has been a busy session. There's been a lot to cover. So next we will turn to Beto Lugo Martinez to talk about air. Beto Lugo Martinez is an environmental justice organizer and the co-executive director of Clean Air Now in Kansas City. He serves to raise community voices in the fight against environmental racism and to overcome systemic exclusion of fence-line communities from the decision-making process. Beto has co-authored multiple academic publications on community-based health research, air pollution, data accessibility, and community engagement. And he also participates in multiple national climate and environmental justice coalitions and advisories. And in August of just last year, Beto was invited to serve on the EPA's Clean Air Act Advisory Committee to represent a grassroots frontline perspective. Thank you, Beto. I'd like to turn over to you now.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about our organization, Clean Air Now. We're a grassroots environmental justice organization based in Kansas City. Started out of as a neighborhood group, right, in the most overburdened communities, and one of the most overburdened communities in Wyandotte. And since the inception of our organization, we've been advocating for local, state, and federal policies that can bring a direct benefit in protecting communities' health, right, from the impacts of air pollution, toxic air pollution. And so our work, like I said, since the inception, is really making sure that we hold decision makers, local government, EPA, polluters accountable, right, for the impacts they have on our communities. Just this past couple of years, we've all been struggling with the COVID pandemic, and the COVID pandemic really, as you all know, resurfaced all these inequities and racism that exists within our government policies, practices, and programs. And it was no coincidence that those that were impacted the most were those living near industrial pollution, industrial facilities. And so, like I mentioned, our work is broad. We're an environmental justice organization, so it's at the intersection of health, climate, and just about anything that really our communities are facing at the moment, right? Whatever is going to cause further harm, we want to make sure that we can advocate at the local level to stop those the continuance of furthering harm in these communities. So some of the things that we are also involved in, not just on the local level, but it's also on transportation policy from the heavy duty and medium freight sector, because we also know that the impacts from ozone and greenhouse gases emissions are predominantly, some of them are from the fossil fuels, but a lot of it also has to do with the transportation. And the reason it's important for us to emphasize the transportation sector is because the same communities that where our organization started are also impacted by the heavy duty freight system, where fossil fuel trucks, as you all may know, are destined to low-income communities of color as well. So as you're destined to these communities, they're not only exposed to the local impacts, but also from the truck sector, where you would not see a truck route destined to a wealthy community, right? It's always destined to a poor community. And so, like Sarah mentioned, that's some of the work that we work on at the state, federal level. We're involved in various committees also around the national air quality standards, around ozone and sulfur and SO2 and others. And then, like you mentioned, I was appointed this past year to the Federal Clean Air Act Advisory Committee to bring that frontline community perspective. And this is important because when it's really a grassroots in these spaces, that we're able to bring the issues, right, that our communities are facing. So it's a very good opportunity. And I can take any information through that channel as well. It doesn't mean that that's the only venue that I'm involved in, but that's a venue that, we can say, hey, we want to talk specifically about a certain issue, and we can bring it there. So if any of you are interested or concerned about something in your neighborhood or your community, you can reach out to us and we can find a way to bring it in through that channel, right? Instead of waiting for the EPA to put out a hearing on a specific subject or specific rulemaking. One thing I just wanted to highlight is about, the impacts of air pollution. And when we're talking about the infrastructure, I know that Congresswoman Sharice Davids, and a great presentation from her, she talked about the infrastructure bill. And, when we think about infrastructure in low-income communities, it doesn't only mean that it's for roads and bridges, right? This really means that money, as you all know, this administration has been very vocal about environmental justice, is that we invest in these communities that are really at being impacted by climate change, right? Being left behind. And so we really need to make sure that we invest not only in the communities, but in places where they work, also protecting worker health. And so it's a whole, cumulative impact of all these issues, right? How is it that we address it? So our work is really centered in that. And then, one of the concerns that we are also working on actively is identifying a lot of these emissions from facilities that emit lead. We usually talk about lead in the lead pipes and lead in paint, but there's a lot of facilities in these overburden communities that are being exposed to lead toxics emitted into the air, which can cause those same developmental issues in young children in young children. However, we really need to take a look at that. So that our work is so critical to making sure that we can hold these government officials accountable. And so I think I'm almost at the 5 minutes, but one of the things for us is really making sure that any information we put out there can be utilized by anyone. And by what I mean by that is that we recently put out a report called Environmental Racism in the Heartland. And this report highlights, the inequities that exist in overburden communities and how local government can utilize even this report when they're drafting their local climate action plans, because we are seeing that these climate action plans are being fueled by the fossil fuel industry, by the utilities, they're not even looking into the culprits around our community, right? Which are coal plants, which are industrial chemical facilities that emit greenhouse gases. So this report is also, like I said, a document that anyone can use in their organizing efforts. And I'll put it in the chat box in a minute. And so with that, I can stay on for if anyone has any questions. And I just wanted to add one thing I heard Dorothy mention about the coal plants. What's happening across the country, they're promising to shut down, but then once a couple of years go by, they said, well, now we want to turn them into peaker plants or natural gas plants. So there's a lot of work around that as well that we are involved in as an organization. And just want to say that our work is really centered in environmental health, making sure that the health of the most overburdened people, that we can make sure there's equity in all that work. So thank you for having us, Dorothy and Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beto. We do appreciate all the work that you do, obviously not just for clean air, but to center those most underserved and overburdened communities in your work and centering equity. Beto referenced the environmental racism in the Heartland report, and Aaron did already drop that in the chat. And it looks like Beto also just dropped it in the chat as well. It's a fantastic report. So please take some time to dig into that today as well. As a reminder, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. If the person who the question is directed to feels like they can answer it completely in the chat, go ahead and do it. If not, we can elevate them at the end. So next up, we'll talk about land issues, and Lydia Nebel with KC Farm School and Zach Pastora with the Kansas Sierra Club are going to lead on that. Lydia began as a farm apprentice in 2013 at the Gibbs Road Farm of Cultivate Kansas City, which is now KC Farm School at Gibbs Road, and has managed various certified organic, no-till, diversified vegetable operations, both in New York City, upstate New York, and most recently in Melbourne, Australia. She has organized with the National Young Farmers Coalition in both the Hudson Valley and Kansas City chapters. And she's been involved with KC Farm School since its beginning as a founding board co-chair. And in 2021, she returned to KC Farm School as the farm director, and she is eager with curiosity and a humble heart to learn from the land and community and to produce as much food as possible in loving and regenerative ways. Zach is a longtime environmental activist and current lobbyist for the Kansas chapter of the Sierra Club. He also serves on the boards of the Kansas Natural Resource Council and the Kansas Rural Center, and he resides on a farm in Linwood. So thank you so much to the both of you, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Awesome, thanks so much. Yeah, I'm Lydia, and we just like to start with at KC Farm School with a formal land acknowledgement of the elders past, present, and emerging. And acknowledge that there has always been food production and large-scale fertility management going on the land here. Yeah, we're not the middle of nowhere, which I know this group totally believes that, but we teach that to folks that come to the KC Farm School, because if we're going to address any sort of climate chaos, we have to sequester carbon. And the most efficient ecosystem at doing that is our prairie, which is right here with us. So of course we do it through the lens of agriculture, and honestly that's been the lens through which all of the Native folks that were here were doing land protection. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the overview, and I'm going to go hard and fast, and then Zach's going to do some specifics about bills, because I'm not as great at that part. I'm learning. So I just would love for everybody on the call to think about the last time they ate, and then the time before that they ate, and the time before that. And while all of these things are important, if we don't have food, we can't do any of this other work. And then the next step, if we don't have land, we can't have food. And we found out with the pandemic just how fragile our food system has become. So yeah, just within a few generations, thinking about how we've had a huge shift to industrial monoculture, we've had a huge shift to more privatized land. There's less and less commons land that's available. And we have this globalized food system. So what we're doing at KC Farm School, and I also, I dropped in the chat, the National Young Farmers Coalition is working to be more intentional about our land use. So yeah, we also are always about equitable land access. I just wanted to throw out a few statistics that about one population, which is Black farmers, who are really important in Kansas City history of agriculture. And 100 years ago, 14% of the farmers in the US were Black. Just 100 years ago. And then today there's 1.4%, and that's Black and biracial. So something's going on, right? Farmland that's Black operated is down to 0.4% in this country. We need more farms, we need more farmers, and right now that access to land isn't equitable. So just as some of the other folks are talking about, as we're talking about land access, it's in general for all folks, but there are some folks who have been had even less access because of the way we set it up. So KC Farm School is about equitable access to land, especially for agricultural use. We're about native stewardship and access Another stat is that in Kansas, less than 2% of the land is commons. That means that the native folks that were stewarding this place have less and less access of places that they can forage food, forage medicine, do ceremony, live and thrive. It also means that just in general, we have less access to commons. And again, that's something that's happened in the last few generations. There's a time in our memory that we can remember that there was a lot more common space. We want to incentivize practices that are regenerative and holistic. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And farmers know those ways. But we want to incentivize that from a policy standpoint. Along with that, as I've talked about, we want to do prairie protection and preservation. Again, the most efficient ecosystem at sequestering carbon. It's also just an incredible ecosystem that provided food and shelter, fiber for so many people for so long. Also along with that is protection of green spaces. So along that lines of the commons space, we need green spaces in rural and urban areas. And right now our development is not geared towards that. It's geared towards just who's going to make the money from it. So that's like an overview of what we're dealing with. I just wanted to say a few potentials that aren't bills yet, but could follow the leadership of some of the other states, which is fund matching for land access. So giving retiring farmers tax incentives to sell to new farmers. Once land goes out of farming into development, it's quite unlikely it will go back. And we can intentionally, as communities, as Kansas City, where we are, we can make agricultural corridors that are protected, that historically BIPOC farmed land especially can be protected as an asset to our community for all of these other issues that we're talking about, right? Water, air, transportation, health. Yeah, so those are the two bills that we hope to someday see in Kansas. And honestly, it's a bipartisan opportunity for us to support our commons, for us to support young farmers, for us to eat, just like I was talking about at the beginning, like all of us eat every single day. We have to in order to be able to do all of this other amazing organizing work.
Lydia, I'll take that as my cue there. Thank you for those comments. And it's interesting on your point about fund matching and providing for young farmers, new farmers, or disadvantaged farmers to get into farming in a more equitable way, having land. I was just walking out of the State House with a representative yesterday, and he mentioned he had some land in Minnesota, and because of a state grant, was able to pass that land to a young and new farmer. So we could do that here in Kansas. We may have a supporter in the making there. Hi, everyone. Happy Wealth Day to y'all. It's great to see you. Thanks for spending your time here with us on the screen and sharing the spirit of environmental protection and forward-thinking policy for the state. I wanted to zoom in a little bit on a few bills that protect the land. One important bill that we'll get to a little bit later that I just wanted to preview here is the opportunity for the state to reduce the sales tax on food. And so I think that'll come up in the health portion of the discussion, but that'd be really important, and especially for farmers that support local communities that Lydia said really stepped up in the pandemic, providing direct to consumer sales and local sales to help support our food system. So I'm looking forward to that discussion. A few things I want to say. Yes, land stewardship and helping land stewards are so important to the state of Kansas, where our biggest industry is agriculture. And to that degree, there is some concern from some legislators that Biden and the federal administration, their initiative to conserve 30% of America's lands and waters by 2030, known as the America the Beautiful Initiative and 30 by 30, is getting some pushback from some concerned congressmen in the state of Kansas and some some folks across the state concerned that the federal government's going to tell us what to do and potentially steal our land in the name of conservation and land protection. I've read the initiative. I guarantee you that's almost the opposite of what the federal government wants to do. In fact, they want to provide the opportunity for state and local entities to design conservation plans to meet their needs. And for a state like Kansas, where we have such little land in public lands, a lot of it's private use, that conservation strategy is going to be voluntary conservation efforts on private land. Yes, that's restoring natural prairie habitat, grassland buffer strips on our waterways, but also utilizing cover crops and multi-cropping of our agriculture, grazing and a few other things that come up. So that's what I'm trying to suggest, is that don't let folks get the impression that we're anti-conservation in our state. A lot of us care about conservation, and Republicans and Democrats alike do too. So instead of, it's one thing if we don't want to support the federal initiative, but what's going to be our Kansas strategy? And so that's where we need to take the direction. That no bill has been or resolution's been introduced yet, but we expect it to. There is an interim committee on 30 by 30. So pay attention and keep tuned for some of that. A few more things. There is a long debate in the House Agriculture Committee on a bill, House Bill 2531, that would provide for agricultural pipelines to utilize the county right-of-way. Okay, and these agricultural pipelines, yes, could be used for water and other things to benefit agricultural activities, but primarily the concern is allowing hog waste to go from large hog farms to other places where they can spray the hog waste on the farms. Okay, and think about what that could do for an environmental standpoint, but also the opportunity for private property owners to not have a say or just compensation on a pipeline coming across their land. So that's one to keep tuned in on. I think the last one, as Dorothy mentioned earlier in her segment, if you look at the land, it's increasingly becoming trashed with single-use plastics. And that bill, that Senate Bill 493 that passed the Senate side, is coming over the House. There's nothing on the House calendar yet about that bill getting a hearing. But in talking with the lobbyists and supporting the bill, the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, they're going to try to get a hearing for that next week. Okay, so if you haven't yet, I saw a few of you in the chat provide your comments. Some of you commented on the Senate side, but get that testimony ready. Either submit it orally or with written comments. Definitely email your legislators, a few of your legislators and legislators on the House Commerce, Economic, and Labor Committee. So stay tuned on that. Those are just some comments. Finally, on as well as healthy soils, there's a House Bill 2310 that would provide for a Healthy Soils Initiative Fund, and that's going to be increasingly important as we try to help our farmers adopt eco-friendly practices on their farm going forward. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Zach. Thanks, Lydia. We are running a little short on time, so I'm going to turn it over to Tammy Alexander with Metropolitan Energy Center right now to talk about transportation. She's a program coordinator for Central Kansas Clean Cities Coalition, managing event coordination, outreach, customer relationship management, program administration, research, writing, and content development. And she is out of Wichita. So I'm going to turn it over so that we can get through this and hopefully try to wrap as close to 10:30 as possible. Tammy?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today to CEP and Sarah, and thanks for organizing this. A little bit about MEC, what we do. We work also in the building side on energy efficiency in buildings, and we have a project Living Proof, which is our demonstration home in the Kansas City area that shows how older buildings can be retrofitted to be much more energy efficient. I work, as Sarah said, on the transportation side. MEC is the host for two Clean Cities coalitions, the Kansas City Regional Clean Cities Coalition, which is obviously the Kansas City area. We work in Missouri and Kansas. And then the Central Kansas Clean Cities Coalition, where I'm the coordinator, and I'm based in Wichita, and I cover the entire state of Kansas. So if we can go to the next slide. Some of the things that we have going on right now, there was a bill in Congress, HB 2488. It was a bill that would require a tax on public charging stations. The purpose of the tax was to fund transportation, which we completely agree needs to happen. Transportation is changing, and so we still need to keep our roads funded. And EVs, they do not pay a fuel tax because they don't use liquid fuels. So they're not paying their road taxes that way. So we do agree they do need to figure out a way to do that. However, we don't think this is the right way to do it. The tax as it was written would have actually required even free charging to pay the tax. So if you had, for instance, an employer that was providing charging for employees or for maybe people visiting their business, they would have had to pay a tax even if they aren't charging for the electricity. But one of the bigger reasons is that there's currently a road usage charge study going on that KDOT is looking at how to fund roads in the future. They recognize that transportation is changing. We still need to fund our roads, obviously. But this study is to look at maybe a better way to do it, somehow based on the miles that you travel and how you use the roads. So if you go to that digital toolkit you were sent, there's a link to that road usage charge study, and you can find out more information about that. The other thing is that even if EVs are going to proliferate, right now they're only about 0.3% of vehicles in Kansas. But the road tax has been an issue for several years. Everybody knows vehicles are becoming more and more efficient and using less fuel, therefore paying less tax for road taxes. And so the problems that we're having with the not enough funding to take care of the roads isn't really related to electric vehicles. With 0.3%, you would have to charge an awful lot per vehicle, a ridiculous amount to make up that missing funding because of the fact that they have not increased the fuel tax in almost 30 years. So the issue really is more about vehicles becoming more efficient in general and not really about EVs. Kansans are already paying an EV tax when they register their electric vehicles. It's $100 for an all-electric vehicle or $50 if you have a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid vehicle. And those straight hybrids, they run on gasoline. You can't plug them in. So they're paying a premium for their registration, which is supposed to go to the road taxes. Not sure why, but anyway, this is something it didn't make it through the session. So it's dead for this session, but we do anticipate that something like this is going to be coming around continuously. And so I think basically we think Kansas needs to wait till they get the information from that road use charge study and figure out a better plan of how we're going to fund road coverage in the future. So next tab. Tax credit on alternative fueling stations, HB 2317. It didn't make it through turnaround, but it's in the taxation committee, so it could be brought back. We don't think it's going to because they haven't had any action on it since last February. So it's been kind of dead, but basically this would have allowed a tax credit for installation of EV charging equipment. We're not against that, of course. We need more charging equipment. That's going to be an issue as we get more and more electric vehicles on the road. But we think maybe a better way to work this would be to include electric vehicle charging as part of the existing alternative fuel tax credit. That's already in place. In 2007, though, that it changed and so that it no longer included electric. Prior to that, it included electric, natural gas, hydrogen, propane, etc. After that date, it changed and now it only includes biodiesel, ethanol, and renewable natural gas. So we would like to see that expanded back to how when it was originally written and include electric and the other alternative fuels. And we'd also like to see that credit expanded so that it works for other than just C Corps. Right now, it just works for C corporations, which are big multi-state corporations. We think it needs to be open so that small business owners can use it. You know, LLCs, partnerships, S corps. We have a lot of small business owners here in the state of Kansas. Some a lot bigger than you would expect, but they still don't qualify because of that C corporation designation that's required. So that's our thought on that, is we would love to see some tax credits available for alternative fuel stations. But I think the best way to go about it would be to expand the existing one. I'm going to drop in the chat some information about alternative fuel corridors in general. We don't have any legislation going on it right now, but there's a lot of talk about it with the funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law. So I encourage you to go there and find out more about that. And I'll take questions at the end of the session. Thanks.
Thanks, Tammy. And you can also drop your questions in the chat, and those the people that the questions are directed to could take the time during this next section to answer those as well. Last but not least, we're going to turn to Jondelyn Marshall with Destination Innovation, and then I will also tag team with her to talk about issues that pertain to her health. I'm not going to introduce myself because that's awkward, but I will introduce Jondelyn. She's organized Route to Power since 2018, guiding the program through a successful expansion in both size and impact. And she has experience as an entrepreneurial business owner, as well as coaching individuals and groups in pursuit of their wellness goals. And that's equipped her to be a skilled mentor and facilitator with the young people involved in Route to Power and connecting with community partners. She's got an MBA and experience working both in the business and nonprofit administration. So she is awesome to have on board with Destination Innovation. I'll turn it over to you. Thanks, Jondelyn.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. Good morning and happy Wealth Day to all. When we think about health in relation to climate and energy, you got to think about how clean air, water, sanitation, and green spaces can enhance people's quality of life, which means healthier lifestyles, which improves lives of all people, which is crucial to mental health, which leads me to my first point. Our young people came up with our policy priorities, and one of the main ones was support mental health for them. We need access to mental health resources for young people and in schools. We're also advocating for student loan relief, grants, and mental health specialists. We attended a town hall a few months ago with local legislators, and one of the a lot of the testimonies was in regards to mental health, and so a lot of them talked about the shortage of mental health specialists, and it was due to the money and the cost that it takes to become certified and licensed. So of course, our suggested actions was for you guys to attend a youth-led panel today. That'll be at 1 o'clock. And then call your legislators and senators and let them know that you support Medicaid expansion that is good for our economy and health of all Kansas, and to also go to your local school boards and let them know that we need more mental health resources in schools. One of the panelists on the youth panel at 1 o'clock, Alondra Lerma, she approached her high school about having a safe room and just a space for young people who are in mental health crisis to come to, and they couldn't support it because they didn't have the resources or the funds to do it. And so we need these resources, which leads into number 2, support Medicaid expansion. Call them and let them know that it's the right thing to do. When you think about it, would help about over 175,000 working Kansas to have access to affordable health care. It's one of those things that we definitely need to rally, call in, and make sure they know that this is a priority, okay? And that's it for me. I'm trying to wrap up as quickly as possible because I know that we're running short on time, but I just want to thank you all for allowing me the space to speak and talk about our policy priorities. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the day. Make sure that you support our young people at 1 o'clock today. They have some important things that they want to share with you. So I will see you guys there at 1 o'clock, right?
That's right. Hey, thanks, Jondelyn.
No problem.
So if we could go on to the next slide, there are a couple of other things that are definitely impacting our health. And Beto took some good time to talk about the importance of advocating for environmental justice. And we really do need to center the voices of fence line communities and increase their capacity to be in the decision-making process in local, state, and federal policies. That's absolutely critical. So again, please review that environmental racism in the Heartland report that was co-authored by Clean Air Now and the Union of Concerned Scientists. And you can use that when advocating for legislative action and advocating for your communities. And you can also spread awareness about that report. You can share it out on social media as well. You know, the other big thing that Zach alluded to during land is the elimination of the state food sales tax. And Kansans pay more taxes on groceries than on any other state. We're at a 6.5% sales tax for food. And in comparison, like to Nebraska, for example, which is 0, you know, I mean, it's the second highest in the country. And, you know, at this point in time, it's absolutely time to eliminate it. And so there are actually a number of bills that are live right now that are all tax bills. And there's a good roundup that Aaron just dropped in the chat. There's 6 different bills that are looking to achieve this session. And some of them were introduced by the Senate and House tax committees. That's Senate Bill 339 and House Bill 2484. Then the governor's bills are Senate Bill 342 and 2487. And those are just to completely eliminate the sales tax immediately. Then a couple of other bills have been introduced, 2616, House Bills 2616 and 2711. And those are more of a gradual step down of the food sales tax rate. And they have a couple of other items in there that talk about maybe a sales tax refund for low-income families and ways to protect the state highway fund from lost revenue. So take some time to dig into those sales tax bills, and just know that at the end of the day, we are hoping that you both learn about that today and then contact both members of your legislators and members of the Senate and House tax committees and show your support for eliminating the state food sales tax. Like I said, it is higher in Kansas than it is in most of the rest of the country, but definitely in the region. And, you know, if we have a tax exemption for farmers markets and direct to consumer sales, you know, we can that'll offer an incentive to local, like sustainably grown foods. And then that also can have what's kind of called like an economic multiplier, where if you're keeping some of this money in local farmers markets, for example, those dollars that are spent are going to circulate through the local economy more before leaving and being spent on out-of-state sources. You know, so we can achieve this and put more money in the pockets of families and communities without adding a significant revenue loss to the state by supporting some of these tax bills. You know, and some of the other things to think about with that is, you know, if there are supports in there for supporting local food systems and farmers markets, you're also reducing the travel miles of the food itself. And so there are definitely some environmental impacts there as well. So take some time with that today. We are over time right now, so I'm going to go ahead and stop on that. If you do have questions, absolutely, please drop them in the chat. We can always address them if you want to stay on and ask some of your questions, and we can direct you to the right folks or to the right answers in between this session and the next one. So with that, I am going to go ahead and wrap up and just let you know that we'll break until 11, at which point in time there's going to be a KIA briefing. So take the next 22 minutes to take a bio break, refill some coffee, get up and stretch, spend some time with that toolkit, and maybe even get started on some actions. And you can stay on the Zoom link if you want, or you can just go off camera, or you can drop off and rejoin again at your convenience. So we'll see you at 11. Thank you. Or yes, Lydia, go out and get some Kansas sun. Thank you.